Dad, you said when you were 12 you moved to Virginia?
Yeah, my dad was getting, his nerves were breaking down, and he was really, he suffered from depression. I didn't realize it at the time, but he was very, very uptight from the stress of the church work, and also, I guess, worrying about war stuff and things like that. And so he made arrangements to move up to Virginia, but before the bulk of the family moved, he sent, I was 12 years old. I remember this happening. I was 12 and Billy was 10 or whatever. Anyway, Dad sent us on the Greyhound bus up to Denby. Got a job. I got a job living with some people, the Sam Powell family up in Denby, and they lived out next to the Warwick River and had a dairy farm. So, at any rate, Bill and I got on the Greyhound bus in Tampa and rode by ourselves up to Atlanta. I remember sitting on the curb at Atlanta. I was afraid to go in. They had a rest stop for about a half an hour or so, and the bus driver tried to get us to go on in there to the train station, and we were scared the bus might take off and leave us. So we sat out there on the curb. Mom had packed us some lunch and stuff, and we had sandwiches in a bag, and we sat out there and ate that. And then when we got up to Denby, we got off the bus with our suitcases and out. It was out along Route 60, near Oyster Point. It wasn't quite Oyster Point, but it was out that direction, near the Providence Church. And we got off and walked back to Grandpa's. It was a couple miles back there. And I remember carrying a suitcase and walking back there. And on the way, we met up with Irma and Christy Yoder. And Irma is Mrs. Paul Lehman, now the ones that were in Africa at the guest house in Nairobi for a long time. But at any rate, she and her brother Christy was younger. He was about Bill's age probably, and they were out walking, and so I remember they met us and asked us questions about ourselves and all this, and then I'm not sure if they walked with us as we went back to Grandpa's house or not, but then I went and lived on the farm then with the Powells. They came over and picked me up from there, I guess, and worked for a year and went to school too. I was in junior high school then, and went to Morrison High School near Newport News. We had to ride the bus for about 12 miles, was from where we lived into there. And I helped with chores around the farm and swept out the stables and fed the cows and did various things around there to help with crank the cream separator when they separated the milk. And they had a dairy farm that they sold raw milk, and so they'd bottle this milk every day, and they had to take it into town and sell it. They had a little retail route, and they also sold some through a store in there. And I didn't go into town and help deliver that, but at any rate, Bill went and lived with Uncle Henry Hertzler's, and they kept him for that year.
Which is Lois Hostetter's parents.
Yeah, Lois Hostetter's parents. And then at the end of that time, the next year, Mom and Dad and Ann and Johnny and Donald drove up. I guess Mom and Ann and Donald came up on the train to Denby. And Dad wasn't sure if this thing was going to work or not because the tires were in terrible shape, the car was in bad shape. So he and Johnny drove up with the car. And I remember that they had a blowout somewhere along the line because Johnny told me the story. they had to get in the town where they got to. They had to get the ration board to issue a ticket so they could get a ration ticket to buy a new set of tires, and they finally made it up there, but his nerves were shot. And at that time, Dad was so jumpy, and we lived in a house, and we rented a house for a short time from Ada Morris's father, John Lehman, and the house didn't have indoor plumbing. It had running water on the back porch, but it didn't have indoor bathroom or anything, and it had a coal stove in the middle of the hallway living room there that we heated the thing. And I remember that, of course, I lived then at home after that, after the folks got up there. And Dad's nerves were so bad that you're sitting at the table eating dinner. If you dropped a fork or a spoon or something on the table, he'd just jump, oh, like that. It just like you'd shot him. I mean, he was just so on edge. And gradually, though, working with his hands and getting away from the stress of the running the church and stuff, he began to get calmed down. He got a job working for the Colony Farms Dairy, and he was driving a milk truck and delivering milk to stores, and I would go with him. My brother Billy and I helped him on the milk route, and we'd go, had some retail. We'd have to jump off the truck and run these things into the house. People would get home delivery of milk back in those days, and so you had to remember if this person gets a pint of cream and a quart of chocolate milk or buttermilk or whole milk, whatever it was that they were getting, you had to remember that for each person on your route and run it into their house and drop it off. And the driver, of course, stayed with the truck, so Dad didn't do the running. We boys did the running for it. And then when we got to the grocery stores, we'd have to take the milk in there and stock the milk cases in the store. That'd take out the old milk, and we'd bring the old milk, as I remember, bring it back to the dairy. And when you got back to the dairy, the day, the milk was out of date. I guess we left it in there for a day or two, and then we'd bring the old milk back to the dairy, and they'd repasteurize it and mix it with chocolate, make chocolate drink out of it. Then they'd send it back and sell it as chocolate drink. And that was fresh milk. It just wasn't, hadn't spoiled or anything, but it was just that they recycled it and put fresh milk out in the cases. The rattling of those those bottles, and every now and then some bottle crashing and breaking and all, I think that all helped Dad's nerves to calm down. And then he had some kind of a disagreement with John Lehman over the house. It was something, I don't know what all was the trouble, but we moved out of that and moved down to Grandpa Shanks, and there was and Elizabeth lived at home yet, and she used to have a baking business that she baked cakes and pies and stuff and took into market to sell all the time. And so she had a couple of ladies that worked for her, and I don't know if she had given up that business by that time or not, but I know that we moved into the bake shop. It was like a little house right behind the farmhouse, and there was room there for an apartment, and so our family moved in there for a year or so. But actually we were only up there 3 years in Denby. I was. And I guess Mom and Dad and the others in the family were only there 2 years, because we then moved to Harrisonburg. Dad wanted us to be able to go to Eastern Mennonite High School. So he got a job working for Mom's cousin, Jacob Shank, at the hatchery in Parkview outside of Harrisonburg. And so we went to Parkview and got an apartment there. and I started high school then, and we had finished junior high school by that time, so I had to take a couple classes over because I flunked one or two. I think it was algebra and algebra and maybe an English class. I'm not sure. It was, but you know, thinking back on it, for a 12-year-old to be away from home like I was for that year, I didn't have my family there, you know, and I missed mom and dad. But I didn't think about it at the time, but I'm sure that's why my lessons slipped a little bit, because I got real good grades when I was up in Harrisonburg. And so I took the algebra over, and then I took Algebra 1 over, and took second year algebra and made A's in that. Went on to plain geometry and made A in that. You know, it was a lot easier for me when I was home with the parents. But we lived there, and we moved a couple times there too. When we first moved to Harrisonburg, then we lived in another one of John Lehman's apartments. He and a brother-in-law of his owned an apartment building there in Harrisonburg, and we lived there for a time. And then Hubert Hellman had an old barn that he remodeled, and that was he fixed that up, and we moved into that, and that was an interesting place. It was he put a new floor in it, put like a crawl space or something on it, and concrete front porch, and that's where I lived then after I graduated high school. That decided I wanted to come up here to Uncle Ray's up in. My cousin Harold Shank talked me into coming up here and getting a job, so that's how I came to Howard County.
All right, we'll get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
How did you do in your class, Mom? You good student?
In high school? Yeah, I was a good student.
You didn't graduate though?
Yeah, I
You
graduated.
graduated in 11 years.
I graduated in 11 years, yeah. That was all I had. Yep, I graduated.
What was
in
your rank in your class?
46. I was number 2.
Out of how many?
55. So, not much competition there, huh? The structure of the school was a whole lot different than it is today. There weren't a lot of options about what you could take in high school. You either prepared for college or you prepared for business. That was your two choices. So obviously I took courses that prepared me for business, to be a secretary. And then when I was a senior, they were looking for somebody at the Board of Education. And they asked if anybody at the school would be interested in applying for the job, and a couple of us did. And I got the job. I think Mr. Yingling kind of helped me get the job, but nevertheless, I got the job. And so I worked there 2 days a week the last half of my senior year. And then I went to work full-time after I graduated. So I didn't really have to look for a job after I got out of school. Pay wasn't great, but it probably wasn't anywhere. I think I made as much as the kids that worked for the lawyers, but still wasn't great. Teachers made pitiful salaries. The year I went to work full-time, they got a raise to $1,300 a year. So $100 a month plus was not very much, but nevertheless, that's what teachers made. And they were paid on a 10-month basis. So most of them found summer jobs. But I worked at the Board of Education then until Carol was born. And there are things I wish I would have done differently, but I didn't. So
how old were you when Carol was born?
I was 23, sorry.
So you worked there like 5 years?
Yeah.
6 years?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Who'd you work for?
Well, when I first went to work there, I was kind of a girl Friday. I did work for the supervisors, and there wasn't a large staff at the Board of Education, but I worked for a couple of the supervisors. And then the superintendent retired, and Mr. Yingling, who had been my high school principal, became the superintendent. And then I became his secretary because the lady that had worked for the other one really didn't want to do it. She didn't like Mr. Yingling, and she really didn't want to do it. She preferred doing something else. So she took over the bookkeeping, and then I became Mr. Yingling's secretary. So, and I stayed there, as I say, till Carol was born. And
Why did you choose business instead of college prep?
Well, there would have been no chance in this world of going to college. Absolutely, there just would not have been a chance for that. Wouldn't.
It's not something you wanted to do?
Well, I don't know if I wanted to or not, but it wasn't even an option. I mean, I just knew there was no way you could afford to go to college. Only people who had money went to college. So it was just not even thought about.
Tell me some more about your dad.
Well,
You said he liked to fish.
He loved to fish.
He was a very social person.
He was a very social person. Yes, he was. And he used to go hunting too. And because I remember him bringing squirrels and rabbits back. I don't remember him liking hunting like he did fishing though. And he was a very kind person, really. Very soft-hearted. I could, after they got TV, I could see him sitting and watching TV shows, and he'd have tears in his eyes. So he's a rather soft-hearted person. I think it was really hard on him when Mom went to the hospital, though. They had these two kids that were, if I was 10, Marion would have been 5. So he had these two little kids that had to be taken care of, and I think that was really difficult. A friend of ours came down from New York when she first went to the hospital until he had time to look for someone and get somebody to come stay with us. And she says she can remember how upset Daddy was. And I guess it didn't register with me because I was really so young, but she can remember how upset Daddy was that Mama got sick and had to go away. And, you know, it just changed our whole life. That's all there is to it.
Was that Gladys?
Helen Maxwell?
No, it was Bill's first wife, Helen.
Yeah.
Gladys was Dad's cousin. And she married Bill after Helen and Bill finally got divorced, and she married Bill after that. But it was through her that we learned to know the Maxwells. I don't know how they met them. I really don't remember. I know Gladys and her sister went to New York, and I guess they were probably looking for a new life. I don't know, because they came from a rather large family and not very wealthy. And I guess they were looking for a new life, and they went to New York, and they met up with the Maxwells somehow or other. Probably was through work, although I really don't know. But then that's how we learned to know the Maxwells. And when Dad found out Mom had to go to the hospital, he called Helen and Bill and told them about it. And they both came down for a little while, but he had to go back to work, and she stayed with us. I don't remember how long. I really don't remember at all. But she stayed with us for a little while. Gave Daddy time to advertise in the paper to see if he could get somebody. Then he got an old lady that came and stayed with us. And
Yeah, she's probably 45 or 50.
no, I believe she was older than that. I really do. Her name was Mrs. Ledford. And I don't remember how long she stayed. I don't remember at all. Then I know Mom's brother, Junior, and his wife, and they had at least a child. They came and lived with us for a while, and Daddy was not happy. He just was not happy, and that's when he decided to pack us up and go live with Grandma's, because Grandma took in boarders anyway, and she just had 3 more this way.
Well, your daddy went along too?
Oh yeah, he went down there to live too.
Okay.
Because he worked at the Donut.
Yeah.
And he could walk to work, and he knew we had, we were taken care of.
Yeah.
So it was a little bit of a change for us, because then we lived in town, and we'd never lived in town in our life. And we walked to school, and most of the kids, we were in Baltimore County, but they let us, of course, go to Howard County since we were actually residents of Howard County. And most of the kids that lived right around where Grandma did went to Catholic school. So they walked with us. They went over to St. Paul's, which was right below the elementary school. The people right next door to Grandma were related to the Eccles. It was Mr. Eccles' brother that lived next door. And for some reason or other, they sent their child, they only had one, and they sent him to Ellicott City too. So it was a whole gang of us that walked to school every day, and it was kind of fun. And actually it was kind of fun living in town. I mean, you could go to the store, we could go to the Five and Dime and get penny candy if you had a penny, and most of the kids went to the movies on Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoons. They always had a 10-cent matinee, and I think you saw a Western and a movie and a cereal. And that lasted about 13 or 14 weeks. And most of the kids went. We went once in a while, but we didn't get to go every week, because I guess it wasn't expensive having Mom in the hospital. I mean, not by today's standards, but it's still, I think Dad said it cost her $1 a week or $1 a day. I don't remember. It was very inexpensive, but nevertheless, he didn't make a lot of money, so it still took a hunk out of his salary. So we didn't really have a lot of money to spend, but we went to movies once in a while with the other kids, and it was fun having lots of kids around to play with too. There was a big in those days, not by today's standards. There was an Acme store just as you crossed the river from Howard into Baltimore County, and across from the donut mill. And the store was only open 2 nights a week, Thursday and Friday, I think. And so the evenings, that huge parking lot was available for playing ball and riding bikes and doing all sorts of fun things. So that's where the kids gathered every night, down in the parking lot to do whatever we wanted to do. And it was, Maren and I thought it was fun. I guess I probably thought it was more fun than she did, because I was enough older that I appreciated getting out and having, friends in the evenings, somebody besides the Eccles girls. So, it wasn't all bad for us. I mean, Mom was gone, but it wasn't all bad otherwise, because it was just a whole new way of life for us. And so we lived with her. I don't remember how many months. I know we finished school there, and we lived there during the summer. And it seems to me Mom came home around Christmas time. And then we came home too, of course, when she did. And we had a couple of people with us for a little while. I don't remember who all they were. I just remember one person. But no, I remember 2. And I don't remember how long any of them stayed. I know one girl we had was just a young girl, and she stayed until she got married. She stayed even after she got married because her husband was in the service. But then she probably stayed with us a long time. Then after she left, we just were old enough that we did things ourselves. So we didn't really need anybody with us.
Did you make any lifelong friends down in Ellicott City?
No, we kind of went our separate ways after we went back home, because we didn't have a lot of interaction with them. And I just, didn't keep up with any of them. They've all gone their separate ways. I have no idea where any of them are.
So, Dad, how long did you live in Harrisonburg after you graduated, before you moved up with Uncle Ray?
After I graduated, just long enough to earn the bus money to come up here. I worked about 6 weeks, maybe. I'm not sure how long it was, and had a little side job clearing somebody's lot of a bunch of undergrowth and stuff. The guy had a lot in town in Harrisonburg that was all grown over.
You weren't working at the hatchery anymore?
I worked, well, no. I'm not sure what the deal was with the hatchery. I worked at the hatchery in the summertime. I worked during the school time when I was going to high school. I got a job working like a couple nights a week, and on Saturdays working for the hatchery. And I would wash off the trays, like the wire mesh trays that the chicks hatched in. And usually after the chickens hatched out of their shells, that left a lot of bits of egg yolk and chick droppings and stuff all over, and the shells would be stuck to the wire mesh. So I'd have to go in this concrete room. It was like a big garage, and you lean those things up against the wall and had a high pressure hose and sprayed till clean all that junk off of those trays. And it took usually about 5 hours a night. I'd do it twice a week, go in on Tuesday and Thursday and wash that down. And then on Saturday we worked 10-hour days, and we'd oftentimes either work up in the hatchery itself, putting boxes together for the chicks. They had a big floor-mounted staple machine, a big heavy thing, that you'd fold up these cardboard boxes that had the little round holes punched in the side, for ventilation. And then they had this wood shavings, like Excelsior they called it, just like real straw-like wood that we'd pack in the bottom for the chicks to walk on. And we'd have to fold those boxes together and staple them with this big heavy stapler, and then pack that material in them. And a number of the boys from the high school would come up there and work. I mean, they often gave that to the college and the high school students. And then during the summertime, we went out on the farm and worked. Also, that when they candled their eggs, like the eggs are part way through the hatching process, took 3 weeks for a chick to go from a fertile egg to one that has a chicken in it. So they had two different machines. One of them was the incubator, and the incubator had trays that flipped back and forth like that, just like a mother hen goes in a couple times a day and turns the eggs around so that they're warmed evenly. When the incubator does the same trick, it's got the trays that flip flop, and it flips the eggs around. So at 18 days, when they only got 3 or 4 more days to go before they hatch out, then they would take all these eggs out and put them over a real bright light. We called it candling the eggs, and the bright light would shine through them, and you could see which ones had chickens in and which ones were infertile. So the infertile eggs we'd put into a garbage can, regular 20 or 30 gallon cans, and we'd take them out to the farm and they'd dump them on the fields for fertilizer. And so a number of us guys would help with that, loading them up on the truck and taking them out on the farm, and that was great sport. They have a whole garbage can full of bad eggs. Well, actually, we'd have maybe a half a dozen or more of those garbage pails full of eggs on the back of that flatbed truck to go out to the farm. And it was fun to take them as you drive down the road and see if you could hit the telephone pole with them. Just time it just right to throw them sideways like this, flip them, and so that they would then smack the next telephone pole. It was great sport. So then one day we got into a little fight out on it was sport, but we were throwing eggs at each other after we were out there at the farm. And I caught one right in my ear. That egg splatted and the egg burst and run this old stale egg yolk and stuff running down my ears and stuff. Phew. So,
was it the start of your hearing loss?
Oh, I don't know if that had anything to do with it. It's possible it might have. But anyway, we ran down to there was a pond on the farm pond that they had built out there in the farm. And I went out there and washed it off right away. Yeah.
So tell me about your move up to Uncle Ray's farm. What did you do? Who did you live with up here?
Well, I came up.
How old were you?
Well, I was 18 when I graduated from high school. I just took the time, to earn enough money to be able to buy my bus ticket to come up here. And my cousin Harold Shank had invited me to come along up and live with them and go to the work for the same guy he was working for, hanging sheetrock. So Vernon Detweiler was the boss. He was the contractor and went to the Cottage City Church. And I came up on the Greyhound bus and we stayed at Uncle Ray's. Uncle Ray and Aunt Clara had this big old farmhouse back off of Route 1. And
do you remember that farmhouse?
A big white brick house, a 2-story house with wood shingles on the roof, and it was really a big deal. Anyway, I stayed there for about 8 months, I guess, something like that. Lived with them, and then along about that time, I got interested in your mom, and so when I started dating her, I wanted to move a little closer to where she lived. So Waller Jank, in the meantime, had just started building a house out here along Route 29. And right now, if it were still standing, it would be right in the intersection where the off-ramp is from Route 100 coming south on 29. It was sitting right on the which would be the northbound lane of 29. And I lived there for a while, and then about that time, Charles and Sarah Martin moved down this way. And Sarah had been a Bible school teacher here, and so they bought this house. I mean, they didn't buy it; they rented a house down near the south entrance to Columbia, and it was back on the Gales farm. It was an old farmhouse back there, back a long lane. And they wanted to board her, so Walter said, "Why don't you go live with them?" So I left Walter's house and went there and boarded with Charles and Sarah for a while then. So that I was living with them when I got married, and so it was only about 3 years. Really wasn't, just because I had just turned 21 when we got married. I was 21 on April 7th, and July the 29th we got married. So that would have been exactly 3 years from the time that I moved up from Virginia.
So what kind of work were you doing for Uncle Ray?
I didn't work for Uncle Ray.
Who'd you work for?
I worked for, I just boarded with them.
Okay, what kind of work did you do? How did you support yourself?
I did drywall work, hanging sheetrock, hanging wallboard, and also then I learned to tape and finish the wallboard. And that was for about 2.5 years or so I worked at that. And then Walter Shank got the idea that he had a big construction project and he wanted some carpenters. He's trying to talk me into coming to work for him. So I left Vernon Detweiler and went to work for Walter as a carpenter. And this was working in off of, but right now it's right beside where the Beltway and 650 New Hampshire Avenue cross. It was on New Hampshire Avenue right in there, and this man was building a whole development. I think there was 100 houses altogether in that development. They were $10,500 a piece, these houses were. And they were small, four room. They had about 2 bedrooms downstairs and an unfinished attic that you could make 2 more bedrooms upstairs. And that was Carl Freeman, I think, was the contractor's name. And it's right beside that Catholic school. It's right there at the Beltway intersection between New Hampshire Avenue and 650.
It's not called Montgomery Knolls, is it?
No,
No,
that's not Montgomery
in
Knolls.
Montgomery County.
Yeah, there's a place down there called Montgomery Knolls.
Oh, is there really?
And I've often wondered, if Walter knew about that when he named this place Montgomery Knolls.
He may have, because that was built before he built this one out here.
Long before.
Yeah, well, not long before.
Yeah, it was a long
I'm not
time.
sure
He
the
did
exact
this in
location, but
in
there
the
is a
late
place.
1950s he built this, 56, 57. What I'm talking about is 1949 or 50, but that's only 5 or 6 years before he started working down here. But yeah, I worked for him for a while, and then my brother Johnny came up this way, and he started a drywall business and talked me into coming to work for him. And that was after we were married, wasn't it?
Yes.
And I didn't like the idea of working for Johnny, but I said, if I don't work for my brother, he's going to always blame me for not helping him out. So I left Walter and went to work for Johnny. 6 weeks later, Johnny picked up and moved to Virginia and left me to finish the patchwork and stuff so he could collect his money from the builder. And that was it. And then I couldn't get my job back with Walter. Walter was mad because I had left him, so I didn't get back with him. So then I looked around. I found other work. I went to work, I guess, for G.Y. Clark, didn't I?
Yeah, you worked at somebody else before that. I don't remember who.
There was a guy
Down at Arbutus.
well, that was just one winter when we were out of work, and I got about a 6 weeks job working at minimum wage, like $1.25 an hour or something like that, down in Arbutus for a fellow that was finishing up a house. And then in the springtime, then I worked for GY, and I think after that I got another job working in drywall for a guy by the name of Vince Tamburo down off of Campfield Road in off of Route 26, Liberty Road, on the inside of the Beltway, and I worked a number of years for him. Their work went all around. We worked in Pikesville and different places around wherever he had developments that people wanted drywalled, and then I bounced back and forth between him and then back in the late 50s, 56 or 57, I came back to work for Walter when he was developing Montgomery Knolls then, and he needed extra help, and I got a job with him, and Raymond Shank and I worked hanging the sheetrock for Walter then, doing the drywall in those houses in Montgomery Knolls. But then from there, he needed somebody to build kitchen cabinets, so I built a lot of the kitchen cabinets down there, and he'd provide me with about 20 sheets of half-inch plywood or three-quarter-inch plywood and a table saw, and I just saw out and build the cabinets right there on the spot. And then we did concrete finishing and roofing and whatever, tar the foundations and stuff like that, whatever needed to be done. And
a couple of your brothers ended up flying, did they not? Didn't Johnny and maybe Don?
Don never flew, I don't think.
Flew?
No, he likes flying, but he never learned to fly. And Johnny was the only one that really got his pilot's license. And mainly because, well, I guess because he liked to do it and he wanted to. I would have liked to flown too, but I didn't have the money, I didn't think. But Johnny didn't seem to worry about finances so much. And, he could, if he had a little bit, he'd spend it. And so he ended up with a pilot's license.
I'm sure Raymond having a plane had a big bearing on it too.
Might have had something, but Johnny knew how to fly before Raymond got his
Did he?
thing, I think, yeah.
Because
Johnny
Johnny
took
came down here
lessons.
and worked too.
Yeah, but before Johnny came up here, he took some lessons with Stan
Okay,
Klein
all right.
down in Harrisonburg.
Because Raymond had a plane back at the farm.
Yeah, Raymond had that big plane back at the farm, and I remember one day, right after he had, well, this was after we had been flying for a while, and anyway, a storm came through. It was a small twister, and I think it may have been a tornado, but it's hard to say. But anyway, it looked like from the damage that was done, the plane was staked down to the ground, like you do when you park a plane that's not in a hangar. And we're in the house watching this thing, and the wind's straining at this thing, and it's wanting to take off. I mean, it was just pulling, you could see it. And the treetops were blowing this way and that way, and parts were blowing off the trees, and it was ringing up. And we saw later that there was a path down through the field where you could see where the storm came through. Tore that plane loose, and it went up in the air, flew over and crashed backwards back on the ground, and wrecked the thing. I don't know whether he ever fixed it up or not, but I know that after that he didn't have the money to fix up on the thing. And
So when do you first remember meeting him?
I don't remember exactly. We used to always go to church. There was a gang of us girls that always went to church. And I guess one Sunday they just appeared, but don't ask me when it was. I don't remember. It was not too long after you moved down here.
now I think that's the whole deal. When I moved down here, the youth from in Cottage City and also from our church all would get together periodically, and we
yeah.
had like a youth group where we just got together and socialized. Well, it wasn't any
Well, and it wasn't really very often either.
It wasn't any, no, but we did get together occasionally, and when we did, the girls were together, but I didn't pay attention to her at that time. Well, I thought she was pretty and all that stuff, but she wasn't a member of our church, and to me, it wasn't one of those things that I was going to consider. And really, for some reason or other, it just at that time, it didn't bother me. But then the next year.
What didn't bother you?
Huh?
What didn't bother you?
You didn't bother me in a way. I wasn't. I mean, while I was attracted to you from your physical beauty, but I really wasn't. You were a bit of a loudmouth or something. I don't know what it was, but I didn't. At that time, it just didn't seem that I was attracted to you. But then all of a sudden, the next year, when you came back to the Lord, you joined our church, and then I don't know, something took off. I suddenly asked her to go to the Messiah with me, and of course that set off some excitement around. So we started dating then.
That's your first date?
Huh? That was our first date.
Where did you go to see the Messiah?
Constitution Hall.
And so we had a great old time there then.
The Cells were here, and they used to have socials. I guess they were the ones that kind of, the ones that got the group from Cottage City coming out here for socials, because
This is possible, yeah.
there weren't any Mennonites around here except the Cell kids.
Well,
And,
Louis Good and his brothers, his sister, came out in the youth group, didn't they?
I don't remember his sister very much.
And I know that
She was a little bit older.
Emily Brunk was there.
Yeah, Emily used to come out.
And not sure if any of the other Brunk boys came or not. Perry and
Yeah, I can remember some of them coming occasionally, not real often. I think by that time they had girlfriends, and they weren't interested in all these girls out here.
Yeah, Nelson already had a girlfriend, I'm sure, because he married a girl that was in our class in high school, in my class.
But I can remember them coming to Cells for social activity.
Yeah.
But I guess they're the ones that kind of, started getting people together on a social basis, the younger people. And Claire Sell always took a big interest in us girls. She was a very good Sunday school teacher, and she took a lot of interest in us personally. She'd often have us at her house and do things with us. And
Is that why you joined the church?
well, that was a big thing. Yeah, she was kind of a mentor, because part of that time Mom wasn't home. She was in the hospital, and I can remember her telling me, if you ever need to talk to anybody, I'm here. I'll be glad to talk with you. Have any problems, any questions, just feel free to come. But she took a big interest in all of us girls. It was Ruby Loki and Ruby Winstead and Viola Wilkins, and it was Jewel Clement. It wasn't a Clement, but her name was Williams, I guess. And who else? Retta DeLauder and Ada. There was a whole gang of us girls that went together, that she were in her Sunday school class. And she, as I say, took a big interest in the girls. And
Are you the only one that joined the church?
well, Ruby Winstead did, and Ruby Loki did. I don't think the others ever did. I don't ever remember any of the others ever joining the church.
The Winstead girls came for a long time, but they...
I don't think they all
don't
joined
think
the
they
church.
were
Well, Ruby's the only one my age anyway. But she had joined the church younger than I did, though, really. But then she got away from it. And then she came back, but then she didn't. I guess Vic had some problems, and they didn't stay around. They moved away, actually. So, but Ruby and I are the only ones that stuck it out.
Yeah.
Ruby Loki.
Mm-hmm.
That's Ruby Clement.
Ruby Clement.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was Roy around then?
Not when we were teenagers. It was later that I don't remember when his parents moved down to the Hollow and started coming to church. I don't remember that at all. But both of his parents became Christians and joined the church. And I can't remember if any other of Roy's family did or not.
Arthur did.
Yeah,
his brother Arthur.
His brother Arthur and his wife joined the church. That's right.
Yeah.
And then Roy did, but I don't remember at what age he did. I don't remember that at all. But it was before we were married, because
Yeah.
Ruby and Roy were dating it when we were married.
Yeah. So that was.
So, but I don't
they
remember
would have
what.
gotten married just maybe the year after we.
So they got married the year after we did, right? I don't remember when they moved into the community though and started coming to church. But yeah, his family used to. A lot of them came to church, but there weren't any of the others that became members of the church. And then one of the girls that ran around with us, Ada, married Roy's brother Luther, which is the only one that's still surviving in Roy's family.
And they had,
So we've been friends with them. Well, I've known Ruby all my life. My grandmother and her grandmother were friends. So I've known Ruby forever.
Now, you had a boyfriend before Dad?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. We don't want to go down that road, do we? Yeah, I probably had a couple of them, but
You were engaged to one.
and that.
How long was that before?
Well, let's see. I was dating him when I was in high school,
He was a high school sweetheart.
and well, I didn't go to school with because he was older than I was. 5 years older, actually. He was in the Navy, and his sister lived in the neighborhood, which is how I learned to know him. And
which was his sister?
oh, I don't think you knew her. She's been gone a very long time. But his brother-in-law was Tilly Hood's brother. And they used to live over on Old Annapolis Road. The house is gone now, but the last house down before you got to the river.
Okay.
And anyway, I guess he wanted to give me a diamond for graduation when I graduated from high school. I felt like I was just too young. I wasn't quite ready for it. And we still went together for a while, but then it just kind of, he found somebody else, and it just didn't work out.
And this was a couple years before
Yeah.
Dad started coming around.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when you guys got married, where did you move to? Where'd you live?
We lived over at Elkridge. Do you know where? Right across from that flea market. When you,
Kit Kat Road.
well, you know where Kit Kat Road is? Okay.
Back
We lived
there
back
at the end
all the
of
way
that.
back at the end. Uncle Louis had a little house back there. They had moved out from Cottage City and built this little house that he was going to raise chickens in, and lived in that while they were building their house. And then after they built their house, he never did raise chickens. And so when we got married, that was sitting empty, and we asked them about renting it. And they said they'd never even thought about it, but they consented to rent it to us. And so we lived there for 2 years, over 2 years.
Yeah.
Or right before Carol was born, we moved. And then after we left, a number of other people lived there.
Well, actually, I think the reason we moved away from there is because I wanted to get closer to the church. That was right after I was ordained deacon, and I felt like it'd be better to be living closer to the church.
Well, we also felt
And-
like we were going to have a baby, and we also felt like that house was. It had a concrete floor. It was cold, and we moved to Jets, if you know where they are. They're on Old 29,
Be a
close
roller
to
rink.
where Forest Hill Swimming Pool is. Probably right beside the entrance that goes into Forest Hill Swimming Pool. Would be
It's sort of across from where 100 comes out onto 29.
yeah, about in there. The old house is still there, and actually the old roller rink is still there. But anyway, they had a big old house, and they rented the upstairs apartment. And so I don't know how we even found out it was available. But we moved there, and we lived there till Carol was a little over a year old, and then we started building the basement, and we moved into the basement when just right after she turned a year old, I guess,
To this house.
to this house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you built one floor to start with.
We built the basement to start with. And we built that in 53.
Now, who built it?
Well,
Joe did most of it.
I did a lot of the work. We
Daddy helped, I guess, a little.
poured some footings, and I hired a a mason to come and help lay some of the
The brick, I mean, the blocks.
concrete blocks around. And then I put the drain tiles in and parched the outside walls and put the, waterproofed the foundation and stuff like the floor joists and stuff. I'm not sure how much help I had from your dad, but I know we built that, put a top on it, and I borrowed one of those tar pots, those things on wheels that they melt tar for hot tar roofs. I got that from Virgil Hostetter, and I brushed tar on the roof and got a thick tar, built up tar roof on there. And then when it came time to finish the house, by that time we're living downstairs, and it wasn't really a good thing to rip the roof off when might be bad weather coming. So Walter had the upstairs prefabricated.
Walter did put the upstairs.
I hired him to do the whole thing then, and that cost close to $9,000. It was really expensive. Anyway, Dan Miller spent about a week out front here prefabbing all the partitions and cutting the rafters, cutting the notches on the rafters and everything was ready to go. And I was still working another job at that time. I was driving across Baltimore to work. But when I was leaving here to go to work, they were out here early setting up the house, setting the framing up, like they were starting on these walls right here, setting them up. And when I drove back in the driveway that evening coming home from work, they had the whole house set up, and the guys were shingling. They had got the roof shingles on up almost to the ridge. And I crawled up on the roof and helped them finish the shingles out. And
well, they had to get it under roof so that we didn't get wet if it rained.
So that they had.
Did you take that tar off? Is that
Bob Rowe took all that stuff off. It
was
his job ripping all that tar paper off.
I couldn't remember if that was taken off or not, or if you built on top of it.
No, we didn't build on top of it. We ripped it all off. But they had all the windows set, and the front door was hung. Back door was just propped in place and nailed shut for the night.
So Walter and Dan and Bob. Who else?
Oh, they had about 20 people.
It was
there.
a lot
Sure.
of people, yeah.
Yeah.
I know
Walter
Irvin Martin was one. Irvin was working for Walter at the time. And
had a big crew of guys.
Had a big crew here.
He just pulled them all off of the other houses that are working on until they could get this thing under roof. And then after that, we slacked off again. Then
yeah, it didn't the rest of it didn't go that fast.
Stuff like insulation and wiring and drywall and stuff. I helped with some of that.
Well, I know you did some of the drywall, and we did some of the painting ourselves, and stuff like that.
Now, what year was that you put the second half up?
56. Dave was a baby. He was born in November of 55. And so it was in 56 we put the rest of the house up.
And Dave was, being a little baby, he slept right through all that hammering and banging and sawing. I mean, it was amazing. I couldn't figure it out why he wouldn't wake him up, but it didn't. He slept like a log.
And we've been here ever since.
Yeah.
So I know you got married at your mom's house, mom and dad's house.
We didn't.
Didn't?
Got married at Walter and Ann's house.
Married at Walter and Ann's house.
Yeah, Mom's wasn't big enough. It was much too small.
Tell me about your wedding day.
Well, Walter had just built the house. I mean, just built the house. And they were actually doing some finishing the day we got married, believe it or not. But we had an evening wedding. And I think we spent most of the day preparing the food. I mean, we didn't have a huge reception. But we made sandwiches and salads and just had cake and drinks and...
Was it a candlelight wedding?
Your folks bought
Yeah.
a nice, pretty wedding cake from down at the
we got
Light
Oh yeah,
Extend.
we had a wedding cake.
And
And
made a candelabra for on the mantle fireplace.
Walter had a nice recreation
and it
room
was
that was
like-
all done in knotty pine and a fireplace in
Like
there.
a piece of pine wood about this long with holes bored in it, and it was like a stair step, and had the candles on it. Well, there's pictures around here of it that you can see what it looked like. But anyway, it was all freshly varnished knotty pine, so it was really pretty. And then
And I don't remember how many people were there.
I don't remember. The place was
100,
crowded.
100, the place was full.
Yeah.
It couldn't have held any more. It had to stand up because there wasn't room for chairs in it. So it was all the guests had to stand up. And we had the reception right there too after the wedding. And it was pretty nice. Alice and Mary Beth were so excited because they were
They
young.
were little kids.
They were little kids. Well, Alice is what? Mary Beth just turned 60, didn't she? So Alice is 61.
Oh, they're going to love hearing that.
Huh?
And so she would have been, we've been married 53 years. So Alice, what was she? 8, 9?
Yeah, they were just.
But just old enough to be excited.
Yeah.
But they said they can remember, though, Anne, cleaning and getting ready for all these people to come, and it was just a real exciting time for them. So.
But we used to come to visit them a lot anyway while we were even dating.
Well, yeah, there weren't too many people around.
There wasn't too many people around and not
Church
much
was
to do.
pretty small.
I think Walter would have to oftentimes send us out because we wanted to visit much longer than he did. I guess he wanted to.
Well, that was more after we were married than before, though.
Yeah.
He didn't do that much before we got married.
So what was the phrase he would say when it was time for you to go?
Come now, let me kick thee out.
Started out, come now let me send thee away, and then
Yeah, I guess it did.
after it went on a couple hours, then he'd say, come now, let me kick thee out.
Where'd you go on your honeymoon?
We went to Quebec.
Quebec City.
A week?
Quebec City.
A week? 2 weeks?
We were gone a week, I guess. A little over a week, maybe.
A little over, yeah. That's
We-
about all we could afford. We got home. We didn't have, but I think we spent all of our money, didn't we?
And we didn't spend a lot on our honeymoon.
No.
But we drove. We had a new car. Joe had just gotten a new car. So we drove up through New England and up all the way through Maine to Quebec City. And then came down through, we went up to Massachusetts and from New Hampshire, I guess, and Maine, and came down, hit the other New England states and into New York.
Up near Saranac Lake, we came by the North
North
Pole.
Pole.
Remember that? So, we have a Christmas shop up there that had this pole. It was an ice. They have like a refrigeration thing up through the center of this North Pole, and it was ice in the middle of the summer. But
And I guess that was the first time I'd ever been. I'd been to Virginia and Pennsylvania, but that's the only places I'd ever been. So
Was that the start of your travel bug?
I don't know if it was or not. When we got back from our honeymoon, and my father liked to go places, and I think that's where I got it. He would have gone lots of places if it hadn't been for Mom. But when we got back from our honeymoon, we stayed at their house because Grandma was there, and they left for California for 3 weeks. They were gone 3 weeks or 4
I
weeks.
thought it was 2.
Oh, they couldn't have driven to California and back in 2 weeks.
Okay.
But anyway, no, he loved to go places, and
I know that the 2 of them and Marion and one of her girlfriends
Helen
went along.
Kaplinger
Went to
They drove to the West Coast,
West Coast.
and so we stayed at Mom's with Grandma until they got home, and then we moved over to Uncle Louie's. But no, we had never been places. In the first place, Mom was too sick to go places, I guess, and the only places we ever went on vacation were down to Virginia to visit relatives. We'd always go to Timberville. It seems like we went there every year up until Mom got sick. We went down to visit Mom's relatives in Timberville, and then Daddy had relatives at Bridgewater, and then back in West Virginia. And that was where we used to go on vacation, so our vacations were rather limited. And that was the first. No, I'd been to New York. I take that back. When I was 10 years old, they had the World's Fair in New York. No, I was 11. And anyway, I guess that Gladys and Ella took me to New York to the World's Fair. And I stayed with the Maxwells. And then we came home on the train, because that was my first train ride. But I thought that was really exciting to go to New York. And then we'd never been anyplace else outside of those couple spots. And we went on our honeymoon and we did all the New England states and Canada, and that was exciting.
What about you? Had you traveled before that, other than
Pennsylvania to Florida.
Pennsylvania to Florida to Virginia?
Me, yeah, that's all we ever traveled was just up and down the East Coast. I never really traveled out of Pennsylvania, Maryland, Virginia, North and South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. That was necessary to get to Florida to come through all those states. But until we got married, I had never been up to like New York and and New England states. So anyway, I think she inherited that idea of wanderlust. She is genetic. She loves to travel, and
All I like is money.
well,
So you don't like the energy, though?
when I get my games patented, then I'll be able to afford to take you places.
So where are we going to go?
To nursing home.
That's what I'm afraid of.
Where did Grandpa and Grandma Sauder go from Harrisonburg?
They went to Pennsylvania. They started a school at it's called Crable's Mennonite School, and they asked him to come up there to be principal of that, and that was probably right before we were married, wasn't it?
Yeah, they were there for a couple of years.
They were there. They were there for a number of years, really.
Yeah.
And he was principal of the school, and then I don't know why he left. I really don't remember at all.
Well, I think because they fired him.
Did they fire him?
Yeah, there was one of the guys on the board that evidently there was friction between them, and for some reason they didn't like him. And Dad used to tell me about it. This was that bishop, remember, that got into difficulties. Remember that? But at any rate, there was something there that was haywire. But anyway, their personality and maybe his teaching style, I don't know, it didn't click. So
That's the school right over by Zinn's, right?
Huh?
That's the school over by Zinn's Diner, right?
in E-Town, Elizabethtown.
Oh, I'm sorry, different. Forget it. Okay.
I was going to say,
There's another Crable's, which is different. Okay.
Well, I'm not sure exactly what you call it.
I'm not sure
There
where
was
the school was located. I just know it was Crable's Mennonite School, and there's only one that I know of.
Yeah.
And it's
It's over close to Denver.
Oh, no, it wasn't over that direction.
Okay, it's a different one then.
okay.
Yeah. This was down. I know they went to the Elizabethtown church. Well, for a while they had a pastor there at Elizabethtown. So Dad and I guess they'd had
They
too
went
many.
to Marietta.
I know they asked Dad to go over to Marietta because the pastor at Marietta had left them, had split. The church had split up, and they needed somebody to hold the fort down at Marietta. So Dad was asked to go over there because they already had too many preachers at Elizabethtown. So that's where he worshiped, over at Marietta. But their home and the school was there in East Elizabethtown.
No, I didn't remember that school was in Elizabethtown, but anyway, he was there a number of years. I don't remember how many. Then after he left there, they went to New York for school, taught up there for
Right outside of Buffalo.
right outside of Buffalo. Yeah, not Lancaster.
Is that how Aunt Ann ended up meeting?
No, Don's family was
Seacrest
from Lancaster County.
Okay.
And they didn't move up there to New York State until Uncle Don's father got a bug in his butt that he wanted to move up to Potter County, Pennsylvania. Which, when he went hunting up there, he admired all that thing, and he saw
This is
the
Don
farm.
Ann you're
Don
talking about.
Seacrest's father. Yeah,
Yeah,
Don
Don
Seacrest's father.
But she met Don in Lancaster County.
Yeah.
It may have been when she went to LMH. I'm not real sure.
That probably is.
That's probably
yeah.
where she met Don.
But they didn't move up to New York State. They moved
Actually,
down.
they lived here for a couple years.
They
Well,
lived
he
in
served
our
his 1W
basement.
here.
We rented our basement apartment to them for a number of years.
To
Don and Ann.
Uncle Don and Aunt Ann.
The year after we built our house, they lived in the basement. They didn't live there very long, though, Joe.
Yeah, I guess not. Then they were moved. then they up to
Then they moved to New York, right?
New York. Yeah.
Yeah. Because
See-
Denny was born when they were living here, and
Yeah.
so was Judy. And they moved when Judy was a baby, but they're only like a year apart.
Yeah.
So, but
No,
he,
they weren't actually. I mean, they were born in a hospital, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
They lived here. Interesting.
yeah. And then Don's father wanted him to move up there, so they decided to move up there.
Well, Grandpa and Grandma must have ended up back here at some point.
Yeah, they only stayed in New York for a year. I think it was a year. And then they moved down here. And he worked for Walter for a while, but he was not really adept at a lot of construction work, and that didn't work out too well. And he finally left Walter, and he worked for Virgil Hosstetter, and that was a better mix. Not that he did any better work, but Virgil was just a different kind of person. A little more, I guess not as pushy.
He had more patience.
More
with that.
patience, right.
Because, Virgil was married to his niece.
Right, and they, plus I think your father was a big help to Virgil.
Yeah.
Virgil was, I don't want to say illiterate because he could read, but he really couldn't read or write either one very well. And I think Grandpa was a big help to Virgil and
Encouraged him to learn.
encouraging him to learn to read better and write. And actually he helped him write,
Ghost wrote.
he helped him write a column that was in the Gospel Herald for a long time called From the Deacon's Bench. Because Virgil would have good ideas, but he didn't know how to put them down on paper, and he would, I guess, write out his thoughts, and Grandpa helped him get it together and send it off to the to the Gospel Herald. So he did that for a long time, but he and Virgil got along well because he was, I guess they were more compatible, emotionally. That's not emotional, but personality-wise, they were more compatible. And then he worked there, I guess, until the church asked him to go back to Florida. And they went back to Tampa for a number of years.
I think they were down there 7 years the second time.
I don't remember because I don't.
Probably more down there longer that time than he was the first time he was down there. But the second time, he didn't have the administrative responsibilities, and so it wasn't the stress on his emotions that it was the first time. And I think really, and it's only a personal opinion, when we were down there the first time, his dad, my grandpa Sauder, died of a stroke when they had like hardening of the arteries, so I think, and maybe had a stroke. At any rate, he died back in the late.
Died in 42, according to the
somewhere,
tombstone.
Yeah. And at any rate, Dad, that was hard on Dad, and I'm thinking maybe that also contributed to his emotional breakdown. And then
Well, the second time they were in Florida, that seemed to go really well for them.
Yeah.
And actually, they stayed down there until his health. He went to Georgia for Bible school or for meetings or something, and he got really sick when he was in Georgia. And they actually didn't expect him to live. And they called Joe and Don and Bill drove down to Georgia to be with them because they really didn't think he was going to pull through. And after that, he never quite bounced back to where he had been. And the boys almost insisted that he come north because it was just too far. Don and Joe and Bill was in Richmond. Johnny was in Florida, but the boys, the three of them, almost insisted that he come back north, where he would be closer to them if anything went wrong, and they could look out for them better. So by that time, they were early 60s, I guess, and the mission board brought them back, and they went to Landis Homes.
they were old enough to start drawing Social Security.
I think that I don't think
he
they
was
were
62 when he came.
That's what runs in my
Yeah.
mind too. He was about 62 when he went to Landis Homes, and that's of course.
They had an apartment there.
So they probably came back to Landis Homes about the time you were born. Moved into
No.
Landis Homes about the time you were
They
born.
moved in Landis Homes probably 68, because I remember them coming through on the way to Landis Homes.
Oh, really?
I think so.
Okay, you might be right.
I remember them bringing a U-Haul trailer
Okay.
I remember them stopping in here on the
Okay.
way up there.
All right.
I don't even remember that.
And they went back to Florida even after they. No, that they didn't go back. They did go back to Florida after they lived at Landis Homes.
Then maybe I remember the second time they came through there.
Well, they wouldn't have been having a trailer and
They may have just gone down for
for a visit because they had
Visit or
friends
something.
down there.
yeah.
But no, and that's of course when we went down. And I know you don't remember that because you were only 2.
But
We
then
went to Florida when they were down there.
Yeah.
Then before they came back.
Before, yeah, that would have been in '64. So that couldn't have been '62. You're probably right, because we were down there in '64. Because you were 2.
I remember them moving to Landis Homes.
Okay.
From where
Yeah.
I had no idea. So when they came and lived here before they went back to Tampa the second time.
They didn't live here after they went back to Tampa.
Before they went back to Tampa.
Before they went to, yeah.
Was Uncle Don still with them, and is that how he ended up living here and
Yeah.
meeting Aunt Myrtle?
That's how. Yes.
Exactly. Yeah. He was part of the teenager by that time, and in a youth group. Actually, that Don worked and went worked for Lee Anderson doing tile work when Lee was doing the tile work, I think, for Montgomery Knowles, and Don worked for him. Got a job with him.
Well, that was.
Don never worked for Walter, but he worked for Lee Anderson. And then
I see. Don was in 1W,
yeah,
and I guess they weren't married. I can't remember. I can't remember when he was in 1W job. I mean, I remember when he did it, but I can't remember. He and Myrtle were married in 1960. That I know. And Don was how old then? Would have been just 19? No,
yeah.
he was born in 39. He would have been 21.
Yeah.
And he probably was done with his 1W by then.
Probably.
But
At any rate, he had. But
that's how he met Myrtle, by them moving
well,
here.
he was in my Sunday school class too. I had all these kids in my Sunday school.
Well, they went to Guilford, though. They didn't come to Columbia very much. Mom
Yeah.
and Dad went to
That's
Guilford.
true. Yeah.
But we did the Shining Light.
Yeah.
And that isn't where they met either, though. Because they were dating when we did the Shining Light. But it was in that.
Well, Don probably came along to those meetings just because Myrtle was there.
That may
Possibly.
be.
Yeah. So
I don't remember how long they dated. I really don't.
Tell me about your dad. When did he die?
He died in October of '54. He was just 49 years old. And he and Mom had gone fishing. And from what she says, the motor stopped on the boat. And he was trying to start the motor, and evidently didn't take it out of gear. He was standing up, and then when it started, it just shot forward, and he fell over into the water. As they said, when they found him, he still had the rope in his hand from starting the motor. And Mom tried, and of course her boat spun around for a while, and I guess it just stopped, and she tried to throw some life preservers to him. He wasn't wearing them, and I guess people really didn't wear them very often. You had little pillows. They looked like little pillows that you kept in your boat.
Cushions.
Life cushions was all they were. And she threw those to him, but he couldn't get any of them. And finally some man came by in a boat, I guess, and Mom.
He was about a half a mile away, and he saw it happen.
Okay.
And he came real quickly, but it takes to go a half a mile underwater. It takes a pretty good while. By the time he got there, it was too late. But you know what? I have another theory. It just came to me just now about how he fell overboard. That starter rope. I wouldn't think that the starter rope would tear off just from guy going overboard. I'm wondering if the starter rope, when he was pulling it, if the starter rope tore then, if it was frayed or worn, and it might have torn, and that made him lose his balance and fall over. But there's no way to ever tell.
Never know. Mom just said the motor started. I mean, the boat took off, and he was standing up and went over.
So where were you when you got news of this?
I was here. We were living in the basement. We were getting ready to have something at church. I don't even remember what. because I was doing some baking. So I don't know if we were getting company or if we were doing something at church, but I was doing some baking. And I guess, I don't remember who called me. I don't remember at all who called me. The guy that in the other boat took Mom to shore, and I don't remember her calling me, but somebody called me.
The state police probably
And
did.
I called Marion, and she came, and then we went down there to pick up Mom, down to the water to pick up Mom, and brought her back. And she stayed here then with us for a while. Well, she stayed here with us till after they found his body and we had a funeral. But
That went a little over a week. It was a week till
it
his
was a
body
week till
came.
his body surfaced.
Yeah.
And then we had a memorial service at their church the next day. And the reason I know I was baking is because somebody came over here. I think it was Ruth Yovanovich, just to make, I don't know if she was trying to get what I had, but I had pans of brownies on the table, and I just left them. And she came over, and I don't know, she took them away. She covered them all up, I guess, so they wouldn't dry out. And just wasn't much else to do. And I can remember Walter and Ann coming that evening. And we were having church. I don't remember what, but we were having church. And they came over after they knew we were back home and before they went to church. It was kind of
Yeah. I'm not real sure what day that was, but
it was in the end of October.
I know. But what day of the week? That's the problem.
Oh, he died on Saturday. It's on a Saturday. Because he had come over here during the week and wanted you to go fishing with him that Saturday. And it didn't suit you to go.
Well, I know I was working over in Woodlawn, and I was on my way home from Woodlawn, and I met Roy Clement going the other way, came toward me, and he waved me down. And when he waved me down, he said, "Clyde drowned." So he was coming to look for me.
Well, maybe that's why you didn't go. But I knew Daddy came over and wanted you to go fishing.
But I know I had
And-
some guys working for me at that time. Remember those bearded guys that I was doing some drywall work down there, and
Can you smell that?
Smells very good.
yeah. So at any rate, yeah, that was a real shocker, though. I mean, it was.
That
And
was
a boat
pretty-
that he had, that was a nice little boat. He and Geneva's Uncle Johnny had built this thing in the garage. It was a kit that they bought from Chris Craft, and they had it was about a 14-foot boat, something like that, or 16-foot. Had a 25 horsepower Evinrude engine on the back, but they built this all out of like mahogany plywood or teak or whatever it was, and it had a lot of little screws and stuff to put in it, and it had all the framework, and you got all that stuff and set it up on trussels and put it together. And I still remember them building that. But after he got that boat, man, he went fishing, and
Every chance he got.
every chance he got, most every Saturday, he was trying to find somebody to go with him fishing. And
Like to go fishing
and
and
he was
crabbing.
an avid fisherman. I'll tell you, many a day I went with him down to go fishing. When you'd be going early in the morning, he'd get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to go fishing. And we'd be driving down Ritchie Highway on Route 2, going from Glen Burnie down to Annapolis.
He was kind of heavy-footed.
Heavy-footed. I remember looking down there one day, and it was going 85 miles an hour down there. There's nobody out that time of the morning, but he is traveling 85. He had to get there and go fishing. Then he would get down, and the first thing he would do when he got down there, well, we'd stop at the bait place along there and pick up bait, and then we'd go on down, and he got to the dock, and the fellow that maintained this fellow had boats that he would build boats. This fellow owned the pier there, and he did crabbing, and it was evidently a commercial waterman. He'd just go and do crabbing, and he would build rowboats and stuff on his spare time. And I remember that he would tell the guy to reserve him a couple dozen crabs for the evening, and then on the way home at night we'd pick those crabs up and bring them back, and he'd have steamed crabs out in the garage,
And
even in cold weather. I mean,
Cold weather? I don't remember being
Well,
cold.
I
but-
remember one day we were out there having steamed crabs, and it got chilly, and they had to build a fire in a 5-gallon bucket, had it in the garage to keep warm. You remember that?
Mm-mm.
And they set this thing right on the ground, and the fire got so hot, hot coals and stuff, and it exploded the concrete. It must have built steam up in a bubble or something in the concrete floor, and a big chunk of concrete went boom and blew stuff every which way. We scared the daylights out of it, people. But
But then he wanted everybody to come eat fish and have crabs.
he always wanted people around him, and they'd call Walter up.
Grandpa Sauder used to go fishing with him?
He's went a couple times with him. I can remember one time your parents came down specifically for the purpose of going fishing with Daddy.
Yeah.
But they didn't really very often. But, because most of the times they came was on Sunday, and he didn't go fishing on Sunday. But he never took the boat out on Sunday. But he,
Oh, another thing, they liked to play caroms. They had, those carom boards that are about this big a square, got little pockets on the side and those little wooden rings. Huh?
You guys need to slide.
we're sliding.
Sliding, yeah.
At any rate,
He and Walter used to play caroms a lot.
oh man,
And Charlie used to go over and play with him.
yeah,
And,
he'd get folks to come over in the evening and they would play.
Yeah,
Had a great time.
he liked to be around people.
Yeah.
Well, what about your childhood and younger years have I forgotten to ask you? What stories did you have in mind
Yep.
What stories did you have in mind that you wanted to tell me that I forgot to ask you about?
Oh,
Like your most embarrassing moment, and
I'm not asking for your most embarrassing moment.
no, I remember as a kid that one day we had never ridden a train before, but one day Dad said we're going someplace, and then Mom packed a picnic lunch, and we all got in the car and we drove downtown in Tampa, and we're all excited, but where are we going? Well, we're not saying. So anyway, we got down to the train station down there, and here Dad let us out and Mom, and he had bought tickets on the train to take us on a train ride from Tampa to Clearwater. Clearwater was out on the coast, the beach, big beach out there, Family Beach. So he drove the car over there, and we all got to ride the train over to Clearwater. That was a treat. And then we spent the rest of the day at the beach, swimming and picking up seashells and stuff, and then came home with a blister and backache. I mean, a sunburn. But we drove the car back then. But
that's where Bert lives, isn't it, Clearwater? Isn't it where Bert lives?
Yeah,
I think so.
He probably does, yeah. And Mary Gray's aunt lives just a little bit further south of there at St. Petersburg, which is not too far from there. And then Dad and Mom, didn't have a lot of Mennonite friends down that way. We had one family that was living in the area, one Mennonite family, and they were older people. And he was the guy that had started the Sunday school there that began the church in Tampa. And his name was Charles Byers. And Charles Byers and his wife, they were real plain people, strict people. And he was an eccentric. He hardly ever came to church. And he would, I don't know what he did, but he would go out and hold Sunday schools with other people or something, I don't know. But his wife always came real regularly, and they had 3 children. And they were named Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And at any rate, they ran a boarding house, and a lot of Mennonite people that went down there to live or work would rent rooms from them. So I'm not sure how far they lived from where we lived, maybe 5 or 6 blocks, but they were the kind of people that were more critical or more, and so it wasn't the kind of people that you'd go to and you'd have a good time and you'd visit with and all, that they oftentimes, I guess, criticized the way the church was run and stuff like that, which it got stressful to Dad because he knew some things that they didn't, and he knew some reasons why they couldn't do something a certain way, but he wasn't at liberty to discuss it with them. At any rate, the buyers, well, my dad and mom got to be good friends with other people in the community. Then there was one couple that we went to visit. That this guy was an engineer, like ran the boilers and stuff in the big hotel downtown, and they lived on the Hillsborough River or near the Hillsborough River, and he had a motorboat, like a little cabin cruiser. And so I remember one time that we went to visit them. They were real spiritual people. But they were also, there was divorce in the family, and they couldn't have come into our church. So Mom and Dad used to visit with them though, and they really got along. They hit it off real well. So I remember one day that the man took us for a cruise on his motorboat. And I remember another family that we got along real good with was old Baptist deacon, that he was the letter carrier. He used to bring our mail to us, and so Dad got talking to him, and they owned a farm out a little distance from Tampa. I mean, out in the outskirts, and they had an orange grove there, and had oranges and grapefruit. And I remember going out there. They had twins that were a boy and a girl that were about the same age as we were, and a couple of other children, little children. And they weren't the neatest people in this world. She was sort of down to earth. But they had a nice place out there. It was, I mean, a nice country place, and they had a creek that ran through their place. So we would go out there occasionally, and Mom and Dad let us go swimming in this creek with them. And his name was Barry. Mr. Barry was he was a real character. That I wouldn't have recognized the guy, but he had. Johnny told me one time that he was down in Sarasota and he was driving along. I don't know if it's in Sarasota or if he was going up toward Bradenton or Tampa, but he saw this strange character in this car ahead of him or to the side of him, and here was Mr. Barry. And Johnny pulled him over, and they talked, and visited a little bit. But he said he had a flowing beard. The time I remember, I don't remember him having a beard, but of course he would have been a much older man this time when Johnny saw him, and chewing tobacco and spitting it and kind of dribbling back across his beard.
Grips.
But anyway, they were exciting people in a way, kind of interesting. Another incidents of being eccentric, I guess. So anyway, that was part of our deal, and the girls that worked at the sister workers at the church down there, they would go there and do like voluntary service assignments, I guess. Dora Taylor was one of them, and her sister Muriel was there for a while, but the first year, but she left to get married. She married Dr. Mack. He had just graduated medical school, and they went to East Africa to work in Tanzania, or what was Tanganyika then. And there were other women that came in there, young women. There was what was her name? Martha Easton, was it? Huh?
We need to wrap up so Mom can go do her stuff.
Yeah. So at any rate, we had some nice times down there. I had one guy that was a teacher, Sunday school teacher by the name of Oliver Schenk, and he was also kind of strange because he was separated from his wife. She lived up in Lancaster County, and he worked in the baked bean factory down there in Tampa, Van Camps, and making
Pork and beans?
Huh?
Pork and beans?
Pork and beans, that's what they were making. at any rate, he had a Ford van with scripture verses painted all over the side. It was a black van, and it had all these big scripture verses lettered on the sides and the back. And he was my Sunday school teacher and occasionally Bible school too, I guess.
Now, see, my life was a lot more condensed. I lived in Howard County, was born in Howard County. I lived in Howard County, I died in Howard County.
Well, let's not say that yet. You don't know where you're going to die.
We used to go to the river down below the house for our swimming pool, and we even
Yeah.
skated on it in the wintertime, only we didn't have skates, only it didn't freeze very often. And,
And of course, Grandpa Sauder died in 1984, and Grandma Sauder died in 1989. But grandmother, Dasher, is still very much alive.
it's still very
Yeah.
much
As of the
alive.
taping of this,
Yep,
and living in Ellicott City.
that's right.
All right, let's